Anyway, forgot what I'm doing now. I've remembered. Okay. So I've just finished recording a piece to camera where I said I don't do pieces to camera, and here I am recording another one. Oh well. I just want to explain one or two things about the hatchpool. Well, one thing really. Not only is it full of fish and brilliant for fishing, but it's also brilliant for swimming, particularly in the summer. In theory, I should be swimming in it all year round, but the winter, not so much. But in the summer, it's lovely. It goes down to about 10 or 12 foot deep. You can swim amongst the fish. It's fantastic. So this summer, I thought, I've got a camera, it will do that. Why don't I go underwater and film the fish? So I put it on a selfie stick, chased a few fish around, and these are the results. Well, I can't see any perch up here, but I bet there are some under the water. Somewhere down there. Let's go and find them. After fruitlessly chasing a lot of perch, eventually I managed to get fairly close to a couple of them. Maybe they realised the vast pale object swimming slowly after them really isn't that much of a threat. And the minnows in the shallow water are very obliging. They can barely be bothered to get out of my way. But the other species prove much more elusive. Those might be dace or grayling possibly. And these fish in amongst some weedy cover on the far bank might be chub, but they don't hang around long enough for me to get a decent look at them. So as you can see from that, the results are mixed. I'm swimming underwater with holding a selfie stick, the camera works jerky, basically terrible, and the fish all scoot off. So then I thought, why don't I just put the camera on a tripod underwater, weigh it down on the bottom with some bread in front of it for bait and see what happens. The results of that were much more interesting. So down I dive into the deepest part of the hatchpool to plant the camera where the water's about 12 foot deep. Next, I'm bringing the mashed bread to attract the fish. Obviously, because this is my first go at it, I'm bound to get it wrong. And I do. I drop the bread much too close to the camera, and then the current carries almost all of it downstream and out of shot. Even so, plenty of fish turn up, and some of them mill around obligingly in front of the camera. Not sure what the perch are doing. They don't eat bread. They are curious fish though, so perhaps they're just checking out what all the fuss is about. About now, I decide the camera is too close to the rock in front of it, so I head back down to move it. I don't mean to turn it sideways, but it's lucky I did. Look at that rocky overhang and all those fish. After all that, I've repositioned the camera about 6 inches further away from the rock. So what was the point of it all again? Oh well. Then I bring in another slice of bread, making sure that I drop it off further upstream this time. Trouble is, now it's too far upstream, so while we get a good view of the fish piling in, we don't really get much detail. You might be tempted to conclude that underwater filming isn't necessarily my superpower. So far, the fish have been sharing pretty nicely, but suddenly a trout gets all teenage and grumpy on the other fish. Get off! That's my bread, bloody dace. And now, here comes something that grabs my attention. A first sighting of a roach. It's not huge, but it is a roach. But why, I hear you ask, is a small roach so thrilling? Well, I quite often take friends' kids fishing, and a lot of them have caught their first fish here, usually a trout or a grayling, but sometimes a chub or a perch. Back in 2009, I was float fishing with a lad called Jack on a cold and difficult day when bites were few and hard to hit. I could see he was getting frustrated at missing bites, so I took the rod, struck into a decent fish and handed it back. And this is what he landed. A 2-pound 6-ounce roach. What an amazing fish. I've never caught a 2-pound roach, ever, anywhere. So one of the main reasons for making this video is to see whether there are any more fish like this somewhere in the hatchpool. And anyway, roach just brilliant. They're like the template of what a coarse fish should look like. Meanwhile, back underwater, the roach may be elusive, but there's a really good head of dace, and most of them are in really good nick. Some have been in the wars a bit though. This one's got a split tail. And this one's damaged his scales just below the dorsal fin, maybe while being a bit over-enthusiastic while spawning. The scales will grow back in a few months though. And there's that roach again. You can tell it's a roach because not only has it got a deeper body shape, but it also has orange eyes, unlike dace, which have yellow eyes. Time to put the camera somewhere else to see that shoal of enormous roach lives in a different part of the pool. There are a few perch here, but no roach immediately obvious. Let's see what happens when I add some bread though. This perch clearly feels the need to assert his dominance by raising his dorsal fin. Maybe he thinks the camera is looking at him funny. Here comes the bread. The question is, will it bring in the roach? Nope, not this time. It brings in some dace, within seconds. And look, there's old split tail again, so it looks like it's the same shoal of fish. Now the problem with a feeding frenzy like this, so close to the camera, is that... yeah, that. So now the camera is pointing away from the bread and upside down. Luckily, digital film is pretty easy to flip, and the fish are milling around enough for us to be able to get a really good look at them anyway. There's a nice brown trout. They love bread. It was probably a big thug like him that knocked the camera over. Look, it's another little roach. In fact, from the size and shape of it, it's probably the same fish. So where are the rest of them? What are you doing hanging out with dace? And look, there on the left, with the darker rounded tail and a convex anal fin, it's a small chub, clearly also after the bread. I'm sure you've all wondered at one point or another in your lives what it would be like to be in the middle of a shoal of feeding dace. Don't pretend you're better than me, we've all thought it. Well, now you know. It's pretty much like this. Time to try another location, this time towards the tail of the pool. That's where Jack and I hooked a huge roach all those years ago. So maybe that's where a shoal of them is hanging out. The water's much shallower and weedier here. It's the perfect place for minnows to hide from predators and feed on whatever they can find. Bread, for example. So here I come with the bait. Cleverly, while I managed to get it in front of the camera this time, in a stroke of genius, I hide it behind a clump of weed. Watching this back, I think my baiting skills might need a bit of work. So what will arrive first? Will it be the roach like I'm hoping? No, of course not. It's those dace again. They seem to get everywhere. Mixed in with the dace are more chub. They're pretty much the same size as the dace, even though chub do grow much bigger. There's probably a fair chance that some of these fish might be hybrids. I'm still keeping my eyes open for a shoal of roach, but only this little fellow turns up. Probably the same one we saw in the other two spots. Apparently, when fish do that, they're scraping off parasites. It seems pretty extreme, but on the other hand, if you've got an itch, you've got to scratch it. A shoal of minnows turns up to see if there are any scraps of bread left over, but they soon disappear because in amongst all the other fish feeding on the bread are some perch, and perch are quite partial to minnows. They don't eat bread though, so they're here for the small fish, or, with the bottom getting disturbed by the other fish, they're sniffing around for any shrimps, bloodworm, caddis, or other insect larvae that are drifting around in the clouds of silt. And there's that roach again, feeding in amongst his surrogate shoal of dace and chub. Sadly, he's the only one I managed to film, and I might be waiting a while before he grows to 2 pounds. But who knows what will show up in the hatchpool this summer, and I'll definitely be there to find out. I hope you enjoyed that. I really enjoyed making it. I really enjoyed editing it. I love watching the fish underwater. If you liked it, like, subscribe, tell me you want more. I can try different baits. I can try using maggots, see if I get more perch around. Maybe a dead bait, see if I get some pike. Who knows? So let me know what you like and I'll have a go.